That's gonna.
You can wait. Hi, Linda. I know nothing about these.
All right. No, that's good. So Linda may see and or hear me, but
not
she
talk.
may not hear and see. All right. So I'm gonna come by and I'm gonna say hi, but Linda, a lot of it's gonna be work in the room, okay? Because this is a wily crowd, I can tell.
Yeah, we are.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Our speaker today is Chris Swanson, which we all know. And when we said we'd host, we're like, who are we gonna get to speak? And I looked right at Grace Ann and she said, and I said, do you think your son would come and talk? And then I said, how much is he gonna charge? And he said free. So that even made it better. And today is Grace Ann's anniversary, so she wasn't gonna come today, but her and her husband have been married 63 years. So with no further introduction, because you all saw that bio in your thing, here is our keynote speaker, Chris Swanson. Thank you.
All right, a couple things just to make sure we're all clear. I actually charged $5,000. My mom said, you're gonna be free. Just for the record. I get $5,000 minimum wherever I go. But I said, Mom, you're right. The second thing is I'm gonna point out something obvious. So Linda, you can't see it as much, but you know, part of my story is about my competitions and my training. So I have my 5th Ironman in September of this year in Cambridge, Maryland. So I have a very strict diet training, and I have supplements that I take, vitamin C's, vitamin B12s, my multiple vitamins, magnesium, and niacin. And when you take niacin, it's a vasodilator. And I usually take it at night, but I forgot last night. So I woke up at 8:30. I'm like, oh, I got to take my niacin, right? So I took it and it had a delayed response, which is the reason why I'm so red. You're probably thinking I'm having a heart attack, which I'm not, because I am a physical specimen of health. Now, if I have a heart attack, I'm going to heaven, so it's all good no matter what, right? So I do want to say that, you know, my mom is very special to me, you know, having 63 years of marriage. It really is a testament to people across this country that the family unit is so important. So I'm the youngest of 4. I have my sister who's next to me, my brother, Mark, and then my older brother, Jeff. So I could not come here without recognizing and celebrating my mom's anniversary. This is no joke. I'll take pictures with her, and I swear I'm adopted. Because here's why, and I'm going to tell you. I'm a police investigator, all right? So hold on. Linda, can you hear everything even when I'm out there? Okay, great. And, oh, Pastor Mark's there. Well, at least he's on the screen. We know how that works. But, you know, I love speaking. I love coming out here. I love talking to people. But I'm a ferocious investigator. So my mom and dad were born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. All my brothers and sisters are from Detroit. And I'm from Medina, Ohio. Hi, Medina. That's where I was born, right? Medina General. And so I'm looking at my mom, I'm thinking, how does that happen? Like, what's going on? I think I'll switch that birth. I think that's what's happening. I think there's another kid out there that's shorter, that probably owns 32 Chick-fil-A's. And here I am working for the government, trying to grind it out every single day. But I'm going to tell you a story, whoever has the best interaction. Any other special visits today, like birthdays or anything like that? Nothing? No anniversaries? Who's having a special day? There you go. So I got treats for everybody. There you go. Treats for the special day. Ceremony cells, make sure that you do that. No fighting. Fighting. All by yourself. How about that? Oh, yeah. Here we go. I ran out because it was quick. You guys have the chair. Here you go. There you go. That's right, and you're out. Sorry, you're out. No problem. You must be the tech guy. Yes. So here's the agenda. You know, I do love coming to groups, and yes, I am your county sheriff. I'm gonna kind of give you a little background on how I got to where I got, but the role of the sheriff is even more important. We're gonna talk about some really innovative things that we've done over the last 4 years I've been sheriff. I'm gonna share stories with you, some of our probably PG-13 because of the graphic content, but I'm gonna tell you where we're going and how excited I am to be a part of it. And then I'm gonna open up the questions. You can literally ask me anything, I will tell you. But the role of sheriff is unique. Historically, when we came over to this country before it was established as the United States, you know, obviously they escaped tyranny. And when you come from a country that has, like this morning as we speak, the coronation of the king, they rule with an iron fist. And so revolutionary mindsets were developed by people that said time out. We're not going to be held against our will. We want to revolt and be free. And so that led into the American Revolution, as you know, and then we became a free nation, but crime didn't stop. And people taking advantage of people didn't stop. And you know the fact that we're living in a broken world, you're gonna have people that are always going to use their position of influence over the vulnerable. And so coming from England, they had an established law enforcement model. They had kingdoms that under the kingdoms were the shires, S-H-I-R-Es. That's where the people live. The kingdom had shires, and the king had shires go to the shires and handle the people so they didn't revolt. And they were known as shires. Today we call them sheriffs. And that model was taken because the same people that led came here, same problems, that's all they knew. The sheriff was the first organized law enforcement position in our world as we know it here in America. And as of course we became the United States, sheriffs and sheriff's offices were there to control the jail, to police the community. And then it wasn't until many, many years later that we have towns and then we had cities, and then that's how little police departments popped up, and that's how cities and in fact, south of the Mason-Dixon line, there's no such thing as townships. Did you know that? It's only in the north that we have townships, like you right now are in Flint Township. They don't have that in the south. It's usually counties and cities. And so the sheriff was the first official law enforcement officer across the country. Genesee County was established in 1836. And the sheriff of Genesee County was established as the first law enforcement official in the county. Isn't that great? That was 39 sheriffs ago. When I got appointed sheriff in 2019, I became the 40th sheriff in Genesee County. My predecessor, Bob Pickell, was the longest serving sheriff in Genesee County history. He served for 21 years as the sheriff. And before him was the sheriff who hired me. And his name was Joe Wilson, if that name sounds familiar. Joe Wilson's doing well. He's 85 years old and he's active, and he still loves dealing with people. Of course, my predecessor, Sheriff Pickell, he'll be 83 this year, and he's active and is doing well. So apparently sheriffs have longevity, but you wouldn't know it. As red as I am, it looks like I'm going to drop dead today. But if I do, what does that mean? What happened? That's right. So it's a great day no matter what. You know, I coming from a law enforcement family, my dad, my mom's husband started the Detroit Police Department, and that was their young family. And his dad, Walter Swanson, was in the Detroit Police Department. So I've got 2 generations of law enforcement before. And my grandpa was in the 1945 race riots. My dad was in the 1967 race riots. And I'm going to tell you why that was a platform for me down the road in this story. But I grew up with my family hearing police stories. And if there's one thing, and I don't know who is in this room that may be a public servant, whether it's a teacher, a firefighter, a nurse, whatever you do to serve the public. I mean, you are a public servant. You don't need a gun and a badge to do that. But when you have this drive to be a public servant,
you can't turn it off. It's just this DNA build that the Lord puts in your heart and says, you're going to serve the least of these. And even when you try to go away from Nineveh, you try. If you don't listen, he's going to send a big fish and say, no, you're going to where I want you to go. And so throughout my whole life, we were just a very simple family that loved people. I always hated bullies. I hated it. I hated people being picked on. I hated people being attacked. I wasn't, a great athlete. I was a late bloomer in athleticism. We're always taught to look out for the underdog. And that storyline that I grew up with that DNA that God put in me, it was a natural fit that I always knew I was going to be a police officer. So as I entered Grand Blanc High School, 9th grade, 10th grade, I struggled with math. I am so proud to say that between 9th and 10th grade, algebra and geometry, I got 8 D's. So for the record, anybody who's terrible in math, you can still do well in the government. I can prove it. You don't need to do math. But as I progressed, I remember my counselor, Mr. Williams from Grand Blanc High School. I'm in my 2nd season of high school, and he brought me in to say, hey, you're coming in 11th grade, and we were having our career talk. He goes, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm going to be a police officer. He goes, not with a 1.9 grade point average. And I said, what do you mean? Why can't I? He goes, no. You're not going to go and be a police officer. And this was 1988 with a 1.9. And he planted a seed. Just like those stories that my dad planted, those stories of just victory and protection. It plants a seed inside of you. And I know many of you could be up here telling your story. And Mr. Williams planted a seed, and I turned it around, and I graduated from high school. And when I was graduating, I knew that this drive, that's the Lord saying, put your phone on silent. Yeah, you can use that. But it was just this draw. So I ended up getting the one and only gift in my college career from the Grand Blanc Township Police Officers Association, and it was a $500 scholarship. I went from 1.9 to 3.1 and worked my guts out. And I remember getting that scholarship from the township, and it was another seed that was planted because this was collected from their union dues. And they invested that into a high school student that was going into law enforcement. So I applied to Michigan and Flint, and I got a 16 on my ACT twice, and I was rejected. And I thought, what the heck, So I did the next best thing that I will always be a champion for, and I went to Mott Community College. And I met another seed planter, Avon Burns, in the fall of 1990. She was about your height, Mom. And she was an African-American PhD, and she was the director of the criminal justice program of Mott Community College. And she took hold of me, and I'm friends with her to this day. She's been at my biggest achievement. She's been at my wedding. She is a phenomenal seed planter. And she got a hold of this tall, arrogant, cocky, but confident high schooler that just entered college that wanted to be a police officer. And I was in her intro to criminal justice course, and she said, you need to go do an internship next semester. I was 18 years old. I just turned 18 in October. And I said, okay. She chose the sheriff's office. I didn't. So that was January of 1991. And within the first couple of weeks, I saw my first violent killing. A guy off Center Road by Meyer. He had some medical concerns, and his wife went to go get Burger King, and she came back, and he had rolled over and got a .32 pistol from a drawer and put it to his head and pulled the trigger, and he was still alive. He was obviously in serious injury incident, and blood's on the wall and gunpowder. She called 911, and I remember I was working as the intern with Deputy Paul Wallace, who was a paramedic, and he gets the call at 10:36 at night. And we shoot down Court Street. I remember him looking at me, and he said, I hope it's not a shotgun wound. And I didn't know what he was talking about either way, because I'd never seen anything like this. And we get to that. I'll never forget, the wife is screaming. I can smell the fries, the smell of the burgers. I can smell gunpowder and blood smells. And I was just like, this is a world that you don't learn in high school. You don't learn unless you're there answering the calls and seeing it. And it was a very moving moment for me. Because I didn't respond like I thought I would in hindsight. You can't see that as a young kid and then work on the patient. I'm just watching. So I decided at that point, not only am I going to go continue with college, I'm going to go and learn how to deal with traumatic injuries. And so I became an EMT 6 months later. And then another seat planner, Sandy Dunlop, who was a paramedic, called me up on a Saturday. And he goes, hey, he says, I think you should go be a paramedic. I was 19 years old. And so I left EMT school and I went to become a paramedic, and I got licensed as a medic at 20. And because of that whole movement, I stayed with the sheriff's office, stayed with my college. And, I was able to get hired full time June 2nd, 1993, which means next month I start my 31st year on the job. And it's been an incredible run. I became a deputy sheriff full time in June of 93. I went to the police academy in 94, and I get done in April, and within 30 days, I'm buying my first 8 ball of cocaine in Mount Morris Township on a dope team. So you're 21 years old, you just come out of the police academy. I've been a paramedic for 2 years. I'm working part-time at Livingston County Ambulance, and I'm working here, and I find myself in a drug team. And if that's not enough, July of that year, I get married at the same time. Yeah. I met my wife in jail, and still married. I didn't let that settle. But the Lord, when you pray for wisdom and discernment and direction, you don't have to figure it out. You just follow in obedience. And I want you to know that my family has always taught this. You just stay faithful. You stay faithful. And you stay obedient, and these things will work itself out. Things that you can't control and things that you made some mistakes on, they will always work itself out. And that's how he brought me Jamie. Jamie was born and raised in Lapeer. She's went to Lapeer First Baptist. She was a social worker in the jail. And my dad told me, whatever you do, don't ever date anybody you work with. 3 weeks later, I'm like, hey, what's up? Because I always listen to my dad. And we went on a date, and sure enough, I did tell her, and she says, "Now don't tell our boys this," but I did tell her 3 weeks after we were dating, I'm going to marry her. And that was on the beach of Port Huron in July of 1993. And when I got engaged in February 12th of 1994, we drove out there unsuspecting. I picked her up in the snow, and I walked right to the same spot, and I asked her to marry me. And that was 29 years ago this July. Very cool. Thank you. She is very lucky. I know this. Seriously. She saw this, and actually she's older than me, so I'm a victim because she's a cougar. Right? So you know, these years I've been victimized. But I'm going to keep that between her and I. We've got 2 great boys, Riley and Jordan. Riley gets married next month, June 16th, and Jordan just turned 22 yesterday. And I tell you, we made a pact as a family, that we would set the tone of what's expected as a godly servant, as a leader, as a future husband and a father. And I tell Riley's wife to be, I said, and this is true, and I recommend you, if you're not already doing it. I said, we've been praying for you since our boys were babies. And when they were 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, they didn't know what that was about. As they got into young teens, they would even ask, why do you keep praying for our spouses? I'm like, you understand. Our family unit's going to grow one day. We want to make sure that that's grown in the right way. And so I tell Taylor this, and I'll say it at the wedding, and they'll probably lose it. But I said, we've been praying for you your whole life. We just didn't know your name. So stay faithful means long-term too. Long-term. And I know in this room that there's legacy in this room. And you have people that you represent. You have kids and grandkids and great grandkids. You're being watched, and you're a seed planter, just like Mr. Williams, just like Avon Burns, and just like the people in my life. You have people in your life, and you are those people. So I would just say, as our first call to action, is remember that people are watching you, and your legacy is leaving a legacy. And if you're here today, that the Lord woke you up today, that your time to leave more legacy is not over. There's much more that you can do, and there's much more you need to do. And so I would just encourage you, because I've seen the way my life is rolled out and all these things that are happening, you know, your personal life, your professional life. You know, and as I gone through my career on the dope team in 1994, I'm married, you know, we have a great life, things are happening. You're still getting attacked. And my career has not been without wounds, heavy wounds, things that I've seen. I think about in my past, I could literally drive down a road and I could literally find and see scenes of death and carnage that I've experienced for all these years. Think about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dead people I've worked on as a medic and as a police investigator, as a medical examiner, all the families I've had to deal with that have been traumatized because of victimization. You know, you wonder, and I get asked all the time, how do you stay so positive? How do you stay so energetic? And I will tell you why. It goes back to that DNA. When God's created you to lead and to serve, he gives you an extra layer of rhino skin, but your heart is still tender. So at the same time, you have to have thick skin and keep a tender heart. So when I do stories about ghost arrests, I don't dramatize them. I don't make them theatrical. I bear the sword and I speak to the victims. And there's things that are happening in your life right now that you may be dealing with. And I've never wanted to waste the tragedy of a situation by just chalking it off as a memory. I turn that situation into, how do we keep that from happening in vain? And what lesson can I learn? What lesson can I teach? And I say this to you now because your life is a journey. That's the Trinity. So that was God. And now it's the Holy Spirit. One more and you're out. But, you know, I say this because, you know, these kinds of talks and these engagements, they sharpen my sword. And when I say that you're in a position of influence, you know, that's where I'm at. And I every rank that I went to, because I'm the only sheriff since 1836 that ever come through the ranks to be the sheriff. All 39 sheriffs before me came from the outside. And I looked at that journey, and I'm going to tell you, I was recruited by the FBI. I was one meeting away from going to Quantico. I was heavily recruited by Dave Ramsey to go speak and be on his team in 2013. I was scheduled to be here, be there, but I can tell you everything in my life has all come from the sheriff's office. Every good thing has come from. And so when God has you where he wants you, even if you want to go, he let you go. So wherever you are, stay faithful. Because ultimately my mission and your mission is to what's said in Matthew 22. Matthew 22, when Christ was asked by a lawyer, not the lawyer we think, but a lawyer who knows the Torah, the law, because that's what they lived by, was the Pentateuch, the law of the Old Testament. And these lawyers, you know, they didn't have written documentation like we have. You got Bibles everywhere. They didn't have that. They would recite that to people, then they would teach. And that's what a lawyer was. And they said to Christ, they said, of all the scriptures, all the rules, what's the most important? They were set a trap road. And Jesus knew that. And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and spirit. And I can almost picture this. But the lawyer's like, well, he's right. And he turned, because Jesus was a rabbi. He was a teacher. He knew the law. He turned. And Jesus says, but wait, there's more. Love your neighbor as yourself. On these two things, all rest. See, we forget that second part. Because loving your neighbor means loving people that don't look like us, live where we live, speak like we speak. These are the neighbors. In fact, Luke picks up and says, your neighbor, because it was asked by the lawyer in that writing, well, who is my neighbor? And he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And if you look at why he used a Samaritan, is because they were the most vile people to the Jewish nation. You can't get a greater split. That's like the far right having lunch with the far left. You know what that's like, right? And he said, listen, you know, when this Samaritan was walking, he saw somebody injured, not knowing that two other people had passed by and literally stepped out of the way to even help. But the Samaritan helped the injured Jew who was left for dead. And I say that because when you look at your theme verse today of do for the least of these, that's what we're talking about. That's why, as a police officer, and it's not to be dramatic, but this is the only profession in America, domestic profession, that you're expected to die. And that we track how many cops are killed in America. And today there's 31 police officers that are killed so far since January 1st, doing their job, from getting hit by cars, directing traffic, being shot on domestics, traffic stops. I look at this profession that I'm in and I'm thinking, this is the one profession that has the most public view. If one cop in Butte, Montana this morning beat somebody who's in handcuffs, within 2 minutes, the entire profession in America is being judged by that one action. And so there's no other profession like that. So there's a greater need for us to love those that are injured, to be the good Samaritan. And I tell people, defunding the police was the stupidest thing, except for defund the people that don't represent me. Defund the guy that beat George Floyd to death in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, because that's not what I gave my life for. I didn't miss birthday parties and soccer games to go be what that guy did. That's not who we are. Like, that's the person who needs to be out of our profession, because right now there are 350,000 people working the street in America today. There's 800,000 police officers. America does love their cops, but it's our job to show them why every single day. It's our job. This isn't something you assume. And so every step of the way was this carving of my spiritual growth and my journey, because I was committed to the least of these. The Bible says, when I was in prison, you came to visit. When I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me water. When I was alone, you came to visit. Maybe there's some in your life right now that has been alone. And then you just need to go knock on the door. Maybe it's a neighbor.
Come in.
Maybe it's somebody you haven't talked to in a while. Maybe they need a text message. You'll never know on the receiving end, because I bet you we've all been there, where somebody's reached out to us with no strings attached, and it made you feel 10 feet tall. And I hope that you are encouraged by doing that, because that's your call to action number 2, is to reach out to somebody in the least of these. Be aware, Lord, give me the wisdom and discernment to operate through the day, and the eyes and vision to see the needs around them. It's huge and it's big and bold sometimes, but most of the time, it's the person in front of you admire. It's the person in front of you. It's the person behind you. Last night, I had an occasion to meet somebody beautiful. She, honestly, I've never met her before, but her name is Mother Maggie, and she is the Mother Teresa of Egypt. And they flew her to Grand Rapids yesterday morning, and I was with a group of 700 people during National Prayer Day in Grand Rapids, and she was the speaker. And she had dedicated her life to serve the poor, the hungry. Her journey, if you think of Mother Teresa, who's obviously no longer here, she is the Mother Maggie. She's as quiet and as beautiful as ever. And she held up a flower. And she says, your actions are like a flower. When people see it, it doesn't need to speak, because you know what it represents: beauty. It represents growth. It represents life. And that's what our life should be. There's a lot of people that do this. And as an elected official, as somebody in political office, I tell them, don't listen to a word I say. Just watch what I do. Don't listen to a word I say, because we've been lied to so many different times. So if you really do, as a leadership group of ladies, want to leave your mark, then don't just tell people what you're going to do. Don't just have events where there's this collection of good hearts. Deploy, go into the world, to all corners. And I say that because it's a buildup to what God's been preparing me to do. And so when you have somebody like that, Mother Maggie giving me an example, and after I went down and I met her, and I knelt down and I told her how much I appreciate her message, and I said, I'm a police officer, and that is my mission field. She puts her hand on my head and she prays a blessing over me. And she gets done and she takes a bracelet. She gives me this bracelet yesterday. as a symbol to stay the course. And so as you go through your career in your life, remember that if you're here, there's no retirement in the Bible. None. You have a mission. You've lived a life that I have never lived. And you're at an age and a place in your life that people around you have never lived. And it's not that this is the close or the winter of your life. This could be what you've been preparing for this whole time. Your moment may never have come yet. And you thought, well, I've already done this, That is as far east as from the west. What if all the preparation in your whole life is coming for what's about to occur on Saturday? And that's why you always need to be prepared. Always know that this direction in life, if you are truly obedient, the Lord's going to use you in mighty ways that you cannot figure out. Because I can't figure out my career. I look back and I look at the ups and the downs and the things that happen. And as I progressed through the career and I did this, I'm married and the family's growing and everything is happening. And, this didn't happen and that didn't happen. I'm driving all over the world. I'm writing books. I'm speaking to Fortune 500 companies. I'm going all over the world on mission trips and I'm just redlining it the whole life. Like that's what I've been my whole life. The guy you see here, ask my family, I never quit. This is my energy level all the time. I used to get in trouble for it and I'll get paid for it. But I just can't, because that's how God created me, right? A racehorse has to race. Well, I don't know what God created you to be, but you know what God's given you as a testimony. You know what God's given you as your superpower. And as a believer, you know what spiritual gift he's given you. I know my spiritual gift is leadership, communication, hospitality. I lead and I love chaos. I make order out of chaos. As a medic, I used to look at people, and as in the back of the ring as a 20-year-old paramedic, I'd look over in the England company and say, are you even old enough to do this? I said, let me just assure you something. You ain't got to worry about nothing. The only time you need to be worried is if I look worried. So if I look worried, you're probably going to die. And they all start laughing. People are going to look at you and they're going to determine their fear or faith based on your appearance, your actions. And as God has prepared me in all these traumatic moments to say, keep a good attitude and grow your skin and tender heart, all this, blah, 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 blah. I didn't realize that it would all come to fruition when that one guy named George Floyd was murdered, whom I never met. So on May 24th, 2020, you saw the same video I did. In broad daylight, a grown man in the end was begging for his mother. Begging for his mother. I mean, I've watched World War II documentaries, especially in Pearl Harbor. And when Pearl Harbor was hit and people were blown in the water, and many of you have probably stories that are more personal than I heard stories of people that were drowning because they couldn't swim, even in the Navy. And in their final words were crying out for their mother. That's your first, you know your mother in the womb. And to have that be your last thought, you know where your mind is there? And I say that because here's a guy who's being murdered by somebody that I'd give my life to, that carries a badge like I carry. And he doesn't see anything wrong with putting his knee on the back and snuffing out his life as people and other police officers are watching it. And when that video was cut, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you just saw the whole country and the nation around. They just got fed up with it. They got fed up with it. Because you're on the heels of all these other things. And I'm going to tell you this, there's only so much people can put up with. Because initially it's like, well, maybe that was just one incident. Maybe that was just this. I live on a lot of leadership patterns. And I always say good behavior or bad. Remember this. If it happens once, it's an accident. If it happens twice, it's a coincidence. But if it happens 3 times, it's a pattern. So if somebody does something to your right, oh, that was kind of cool. They do it again, you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. 3rd time is like, that's who they are. If somebody does you wrong, lies about you, cheats you, they do it once, okay. Maybe it was a mistake of the heart. Maybe there was just a little, they do it again, that's weird. They do it a 3rd time, as they say in Arabic, zveli, garbage. You can't train loyalty. When someone breaks that, they have a pattern of that, that's theirs to fix, not yours. That's why I have no time for people that are disloyal, people that talk and destroy and divide. And so I saw this guy that was snuffing out the life of George Floyd, and I realized that this guy, I guarantee, has had a pattern of evil and unethical behavior and immoral. Like, I just saw the arrogance. I grew up with these people. I know I could look into his eyes without even knowing him and say, I've worked with people like you. And then he killed them. And so all this was going on. We were all upset. You had COVID just coming off. It was a hot spring and summer. And man, on Thursday, we got notified that they're doing a protest on Miller Road at Target. And of course, you know, it was still kind of calm and tempered. You know, everybody's tense, everybody's, you know, fighting here, fighting there. It's the presidential season of election in 2020. I mean, you were all living there. And then Friday night across the country, unbeknownst to all of us, without any communication, big cities just lit on fire. I mean, I'm talking on fire. You had sheriff's offices being raided and burned on the West Coast. You had CNN in Miami on fire. You had major block stores in every big city being set on fire and raided. It was like the whole country. You remember waking up on Saturday morning on May 30th? The whole country was like under attack from just like September 11th. There was this aura of fear and this defensiveness, wondering what's going to happen next. And it just kept coming and coming. In fact, I remember waking up in the morning and seeing all these little vignettes of people speaking with different cities, and it was cities. And of course, being the sheriff, I'd only been on the job 5 months. I took office in January of 2020, and we just came through COVID and all this is happening. And I remember Jamie and I were driving, and her father, who's Mr. Chill, he was calling to find out what we're going to do in Flint, because there's a protest scheduled. And so Jamie's asking me, and I'm thinking, and finally she asked me a second time. I said, tell your dad, I don't know. I don't know. And I called my command staff. You know, the Bible says, walk a mile, see a mile. Walk a mile, see a mile. You don't need to know the end result. Walk by faith. Walk a mile, see a mile. Walk by faith. God was faithful. We meet at 1 o'clock at the sheriff's office. I get my command staff there. The comms station, which is Flint Township Police Department. That's where all the headquarters for all of our communications were. We call that our home base. We call it you know, our incident command center. Our goal was to make sure they don't raid anything, they don't burn the sheriff's office. Obviously, it's a mile away from the county. We had 1,000 flex cuffs to take people to jail. I had the city lockup. We could literally have 1,000 people go to jail. We opened up the city lockup even greater. We had transports, we had shields, helmets, batons. We had our rubber pellet shotguns called less than lethal. We had fire hoses of OC spray that would foam this room within 2 seconds. You'll all be incapacitated. Just all that was in gear. We left, and the mission was that we'd come back at 3 o'clock and take our positions, because the protest was scheduled at 5. So we get there, and Miller Road, which is 5 lanes, it was bizarre quiet. You had helicopters in the air from the state police. We had our drones up there, unmarked cars everywhere. I was sitting in the old Pizza Hut parking lot. It was a beautiful day. And at 5 o'clock, the first car showed up. It was they were loaded down with 6 people. And so when they showed up, it was almost like by the second, it just continued to grow. And by 6 o'clock, they'd taken over all lanes of Miller Road. They'd marched to the west, they marched to the east. When they marched back to the east, they actually shut down 75 southbound. And my parents lived just a quarter of a mile to a half a mile from Ballinger Road. And of course, I'm talking to my dad, who, if you remember what I said in the beginning, was in the 1967 riots, who his father was in the 1945 riots. And now we're in the 2020 riots. So he's having flashbacks of how big this can get, how quick. Once they went down to the expressway, now mind you, we're tracking all the intel. We know where they're laying the rocks, the bricks, the Molotov cocktails. And when I hear that groups are coming to raid the houses in that area, I call my parents and I say, get out of there, evac. Go to my brother Mark's house on that. And they did. And you lived it. And you lived it again. They came back to the west, and I remember them coming back, and the crowd is big, we're outnumbered 50-1. And it was still under control. It's around 7:30, 8 o'clock, and they're just mother effing us like crazy, right? They go past the mall, and at Linden and Miller Road, Flint Township has an engine there, a fire engine, and it's parked there. They swarm the fire truck and they move past it. And that's when we're like, whoa, wait a second. They're just supposed to march. And when they turn the northbound shot on Fleckenstein, it dead ends the Flint Township Police Department. And I've been on the job at that point 28 years. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've been on many times calls where they said all available units report, shots fired, officer down, send the rig. I mean, these huge, big, what I call these massive messages, and your heart rate goes through the roof, your blood pressure drops, you're just like in war mode, right? Never did I hear it like that moment when the dispatch from Flint Township, which is their instant command, said, all available units report to Flint Township. Fortify the line. They can't get in. Fortify the line. And I'm telling you, sirens from around the county just went whoosh, because there was everybody coming. And you just heard sirens and V8s. And we all meet behind the Flint Township Police Department. I had already been there for 3 hours. I get my helmet on, my gear. I remember walking over to the back, and there's this little grassy berm. And so I'm walking southbound, they're coming northbound, and they're coming over the hill, and I just see this massive people. And I literally thought to myself, how did we get here? I mean, we have poured our life in this community. During COVID, we gave 1 million pounds of solid food for people. Just 3 months before, because there was nothing. We were feeding people from all over. We were taking people that are insured. We were picking people up. We're burying people. Like, we did so many good things, but one guy caused this. And I come over the hill, and we had all these people in line, and they had shields on, and all the cops are there, and it was just, I can't describe the intensity. Okay, one thing on either side, and it would have exploded. And the plan that we had, I want you to know, the plan that we had, none of it worked, because we chose a different plan. That was no plan. Okay, I want you to know, the plan that we had, none of it worked, because the plan that actually rolled out was never planned. Obedience, wisdom, and discernment, my whole life. When he came over the hill, I walked to the first guy, one of my guys, Rudy Lopez. He had a shotgun with his less than lethal, and he's standing out in front of a police car right behind the lines of shields, helmets, batons. I said, Rudy, tuck behind here. I said, it sends a bad message when you're standing with a shotgun. And he's like, tuck behind here. I go to another guy, Dobbs, who's on the other side of the patrol car. I said, Ryan, tuck behind here. He's like, Sheriff, they all have guns. I looked in the crowd, and they're all open carry. They all have their guns. They have this, and they're emotionally charged, right? On the line, I started looking, I'm like, there's veterans, there's rookies. I see some of the cops are shaking with their batons, because I mean, your endorphins, your cortisol, your fight or flight sympathetic system is in full gear, right? And it was at that moment I thought, man, I got to do something, right? So I take my phone out, and there was a guy there that I had seen earlier. His name is Jeff Hawkins. He's a pastor, and he lost 2 sons on 2 different homicides in the Flint as victims, and he looks like he's been 30 years in prison, because he just has a prison build, but he's never been in the joint. He's just a good dude, and he's the only guy that I saw when they were marching that I recognized. So I called him up. I said, hey, Pastor Hawkins, where are you? He goes, I'm in the crowd. And I said, where? He goes, just look ahead. And I looked, and it's like right where the kitchen is. I saw him. I said, don't move, I'm coming for you. Now, everything I'm about to tell you is complete autopilot. I think back at that moment, and I'm telling you right now, I can only tell you that when you're in that moment, you always act in chaos how you prepare in peace. Okay? You always act in chaos when you prepare in peace. And so I took my helmet off, because I knew it would send a psychological message. If I broke the line and went into the crowd with a helmet, like, am I trying to incite? Am I trying to create this? And I also knew if I took my helmet off, it would send a message I'm not intimidated. Not to be arrogant, but I wanted to know that it's like a vulnerability. So I took it off. Again, everything I'm telling you, complete autopilot. Maybe it was a story that I heard going to Grayling when I was 8 years old. I don't know. But I can tell you this, as I walked and I entered the crowd, I gave Jeff Hawkins a big old hug. I wanted people to see a white dude hugging a black brother. I wanted to try to diffuse it subconsciously. That was my mission. As soon as that's happened, one of my captains, Rick Cronkite, he came over and he's like, Sheriff, this guy wants to talk to you. And I turned and he says, big old black dude, never saw him before and I've never seen him since. He was one of the organizers. And I don't even give him a chance to say a word. I look at him, I said, that guy over there is not who we are. These cops are here to protect you. We don't need this. You tell me what we need to do. And he says, you tell the people what you just told me. And I said, you get their attention. And he said, hey, hey, the sheriff wants to say something. And they go, they formed this gigantic horseshoe. And it's deep, deep. And I step in. I said, hey, these cops are here to help you. I said, that cop over there gives hugs. I said, he's not who we are. You got women here, you got children here, you got dogs here. We want to make this a parade, not a protest. The reason I chose that word is because I tried to diffuse it by the word. I wasn't trying to minimize the cost because I was just as angry as this guy. I was just as angry as, why do we keep dealing with this? Do you know all riots in America since the Tea Party have all been police, white, black related? Did you know that? People don't riot when fire departments lose a building. They don't riot when a hospital loses somebody. They riot when white and black clash and law enforcement's in the middle of it. So at that point, I knew that we got to make this a different mission. I wasn't trying to minimize, but there's some major work that needs to be done. And then I asked the question, what do you need us to do? I didn't say me, I said us. And this group, who had never met before, in 1 second started chanting, walk with us. Now, I know you've probably been to some sporting events, and you heard people just scream. Maybe you're a Michigan fan, a Michigan State fan, I don't know what it is. But you know when the crowd just goes, let me tell you, I've been there myself. I've been there. I have never in my life heard a chant that it doesn't come from here. It comes from here. It comes from the guts. There's anger, there's anguish, there's sadness, there's hate. That's a different chant. And they started chanting louder and louder and louder. So I asked the question, what do you need us to do? They responded back with walk with us. So it's kind of like a volleying back and forth. I give God a fist bump. I take a step back. And I'm going to tell you, I never had a salvation experience where some people have. I had grown to know and trust the Lord over a period of time. Never had a moment. Some people do have that where they accept Christ as their Savior. But I will tell you, as a believer, it was at that moment that I felt the Holy Spirit like never before. And he said, let's walk. And I said, let's walk. You know, louder and louder. And then I just started walking. In a second, hate turned to hope. The same people that had megaphones screaming at us, wishing that we were aborted. You should have been aborted. I hate you. We're taking pictures and putting hands on our backs. And I was grabbing people saying, you made history. I just wanted to save the police department and move the crowd. And as I started walking about 150 yards from there, I look around and I see Dobbs, the same guy that I said tucked behind the car. He's over here. He's did 6 years in the Marine Corps. He's a Marine Corps recon instructor. He's been deployed multiple times. He's all kitted out, helmet, shield, everything. He's walking. People are all over. I don't know what's happening. I looked at him. I said, is the police department safe? He goes, it's good. This has never been caught on camera. I turned to Dobbs and I said, where are the people? He says, I'm following you. It took an hour and 20 minutes to get the target. And the parking lot was full. People dropped what they're doing to be a part of it, right? People were going crazy. And I go to Hawkins and two other leaders, Johnny Franklin and Quan Adams, who I'd never met. And I say, hey, when we get back, we got to talk to the people. I said, I'm going to get their attention. Johnny, I'm going to turn it to you. Quan, you come up. Pastor, you pray, and I'm going to send it home. We get back, and there's so many people because it's just packed. There's no place to get up like a higher ground. And there's a parking lot lamppost there that you see in all the parking lots, got the yellow stanchion. I said, that's our podium. And so I climb on there and I get their attention and I introduce, and he speaks, and Hawkins speaks. And at the end, I said, listen, I said, you made history today. I said, we chose a different path. I can't do everything, but I promise you this, I'm not going to do nothing. I'll be part of the change. And the crowd went crazy. And about 5 minutes after midnight, it was me and my crew were the last ones to leave the parking lot. And for the first time, I took out my phone and I saw what was happening. And the text messages were going crazy. And I'm driving home and I called Jamie. Little did I know, she was watching it live. I wake up Sunday morning and I don't know how they do this, but if the Associated Press wants to get a hold of you, they'll find a way. They called my phone. The reporter called my phone. And I remember getting it, and I knew the AT, they feed 12,800 news media outlets around the world. That's when he hits, it's called The Wire. And I called him back and I told the story at his request, just like I told you. And he said, Sheriff, he says, I'm a black man. I went to his office this weekend. And when I saw what happened in Flint, I asked my editor to cover the story. And I'm glad I did. And I want to prepare you because this is going to be big. And I said, I appreciate it. He goes, Sheriff, no, I want you to know it's going to be big. And I want this number to settle in, because don't ever tell yourself, don't ever tell me for sure, that one person can't make a move that impacts countless people. Don't tell me that Genesee County is washed up. Don't tell me Flint can't be a beacon of light, because that moment reached 3.2 billion people in one day. We had 40 protests that year in Genesee County. 40. Not a single arrest. No cop was injured. No glass was broke. No board snapped. No business raided. And it was at that moment that I realized that this is what God's prepared me for. This moment. The Red Sea moment. I didn't know it 30 seconds before it was going to happen. And the role of sheriff has just been a journey that I've committed to and beyond. We've been able to, as a community, start a task force that started from international experience, rescuing victims of human trafficking, that has saved thousands of people's lives, victims, arrest 180 predators, operated in 49 counties in Michigan, 7 states across the country. The education model that we launched on September 8, 2020 in the jail, where we've been doing the same thing in the jail since 1836, the same generational incarceration, generational poverty, generational addiction. We've broken that bond. We've reduced violence in the jail 97%. In 2010, there were 354 acts of violence in the jail between inmates and staff. In 2021, there were 7. And the last time this has happened is never. I've been the sheriff for 4 years. I've not had a single use of force lawsuit in the jail in 4 years. Not a single. When you look at what the community's done, they've embraced education, because if you break the bondage of uneducation and you give people trades and skills when they would normally just use that time to play checkers and watch TV and then try to come up, and we wonder why they keep coming back. But when you give them the ability to learn how to weld and learn how to speak French and get their GED diploma to earn college credits, when we have over 200 classes in the jail, we have virtual reality in every floor. We've got the building trades coming in doing apprentice work inside the jail. We're teaching them how to eat. We're cooking food that's healthy, not hot fries and Mountain Dew. So when they leave, they can eat clean and their medications react properly. We're teaching them financial fitness, how a savings account, how assets and liabilities, because of ALGA. That's been modeled across the country. Do you know Ignite, Inmate Growth National Intensive for Education, is now the national standard in jails across America? I applied in 2 weeks to Boston, Massachusetts to launch it. I just came from Dallas, Texas last month. It is the national standard. The National Sheriff Association represents 3,084 sheriffs in America. This is the jail standard, Ignite. In June, just next month, they launched Ghost nationwide. And now you look at what's happening in this whole community, and I could talk more and more. But I'm gonna leave it with this, that the things that we are doing now are because of the things that I did when I didn't know it. The things that are happening now and what's happening in your life, what you have the ability to do, are all because of what you have been prepared for when you didn't know it. And so when I know this, when God calls us to serve the least of these, he doesn't tell you when that's gonna happen. He just says, when you serve the least of these, it's your job to be prepared. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's like,
Please raise your hand.
sisters are nice. You walking in with the lion's den. You needed that, know that? And,
It definitely was the lion's den.
Yeah.
Thank you.
mhm.
I hope you didn't get a hint of arrogance or egocentrism on that story, because I was just a mouthpiece. I was just a fool. And I saw it firsthand. Ask me any questions you want. We have a few minutes. Yes,
I
ma'am.
was gonna say another question, but I saw it when you walked with it, and it was like, wow.
Yeah,
Okay, what he's doing.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do.
Yes,
Thank you.
come on. you have to learn something.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask, and I guess it's for the police department, and if I called them, they would tell me. But when you have, something like this murder of this child, chaos. That was pretty, that hit me pretty hard. How does, now, I mean, obviously, this is a dysfunctional family. How do they bury a child like that? I mean, is there some place you can help?
Yeah.
You know, with giving a child or it doesn't have to be a child.
Yeah.
It's somebody that's kind of homeless.
Right.
What, when I saw they found that body over there in, on the Pier Road, in that abandoned house, and the girl had been there for.
Right.
You know, did she have a family that
Right.
rushed in and, you know, he
Yeah.
just didn't hear anything more about it?
Yeah.
I wonder what
Yeah.
happens to these people. how
So the
they-
question is, what happens, there's a couple things in that question that I'm gonna answer. What happens when somebody who doesn't have an immediate family, but has a traumatic death? How do we work it? How do we function? But I would say this, there's people in this crowd that understand traumatic death more than I have, because you've experienced it personally. I've just experienced it professionally. But when we have professional traumatic deaths, I can tell you, especially in our world that we live in, they don't have this. You're very blessed, because if something God forbid happens in this church, this family is going to join together, especially this team, this group of leadership and women and women leaders. You're gonna come up, you're gonna have this ceremony, you're gonna embrace them, you're gonna cook meals, you're gonna have this faith, you're gonna have that, right? The majority of the world does not have that. So there has to be a system in place to take care of it. So the reality is, when we have a decomposed body with no family, we take DNA and we also take dental records. And DNA can only go so far, because if they haven't had a pre-DNA submission, there's nothing to compare it to, so you don't know. We take fingerprints, and sometimes we can take shriveled up skin, like on our thumb, and we cut it off and we soak it in water, and we actually put it on a gloved thumb, and we can roll the fingerprints, and we can put them through a system called APHIS to track to see if that fingerprint has ever been taken for whatever reason. And we can use fingerprints from a corpse. Sometimes we use their phone data, we use GPS tracking. All those things are part of the investigative process. And while that's happening, this body is at early morgue, sometimes 6 months. You know, and From there, if we do find family, sometimes it's broken, and many times, more than you can ever imagine, the state picks up all the costs for a state funeral. And they cremate, and those cremated remains are kept at the funeral home. Just a little side note that's interesting, when you die, you become, unless you're enrolled in hospice, property of the state of Michigan, not your family. You know, the medical examiner of the county has to release your body to a funeral home in order to be prepared and buried. But immediately when there's a death outside of hospice, there's a death investigation to make sure that it's ruled natural. If not, there's a whole investigative process. Yes,
I just wanted to comment here and excellent speaker,
thank you.
because I could feel you going through that whole procedure and you took us with you. I felt it and I got very emotional.
Thank you.
You get emotional. God is put you in the right spot.
Thank you. I won't let you down. Thank you. Thank you. A couple more. I mean, you guys have encouraged me. My face is no longer red from ice and it's red from emotion. So. Two more questions about anything. But the last ticket you got, you still are mad. Well, I don't want to force any questions, and I want to leave you with this. You know, I come from a great background, and I've had my own series of trials and tribulations. But where I'm going here and where the sheriff's office is going, this is literally just the beginning. The role that we've played to be a light around the nation, around the world, we now have a duty to act. And for those in law enforcement, we understand what that means. For those that are in public service, when you have a duty, it's not a choice. And so we will continue as the sheriff's office from this county to build out human trafficking operations across the state with other sheriffs, like we've done with 49 and across the country. We will continue to lead the charge on educating people incarcerated, where 9 out of 10 of them go back to the street, not to prison. We're going to reduce recidivism, the return to jail. We're going to continue to suppress crime the way the sheriff does it, and that is to solve the problem, not treat the solution. This is what I call police evolution. And that's why the downtown Operation Arrowhead has reduced crime by 60%. And the call response time is 4 minutes, 20 seconds. We have established a new trust downtown because of how we police. But me personally, in November 2024, I run for sheriff again. I announced this November. I also am leading the charge on a statewide ballot initiative to protect animals. That when you get convicted of animal abuse, torture, neglect, or starvation, that you're on a registry and you have given up your right to own another animal.
Yeah.
You've given up your land. My second part of that initiative is this one people don't realize. When I go to a house today and somebody had beat a dog to death and they have 2 other dogs, that person is many times unlikely to give up the ownership of those 2 dogs. The second part of that initiative, because those dogs, if not given up, are treated like property in the civil side of law. They are stuck in humane societies and animal controls for years until the case is adjudicated. We're going to get those animals rehomed within 22 days of the first hearing. This is the Protect My Pet ballot initiative. We've got to get it on the ballot, so I'm working with the legislators over there in Lansing. I met with both the House Speaker and the Minority Leader. I met with Woody Brinks, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader, the Republicans. So we want to get a bipartisan. This is not a political issue, protecting animals. This is probably the most unifying piece of legislation on the ballot. But if we don't get that, which I'm confident we will, then we have to take it to the signatures, and there's 750,000 signatures. I'm committed. We formed our committee 11 months ago. We did our national statewide launch on April 11th at the steps of the Capitol. We're moving in great progress. So just know this, know that I'm here as the sheriff. I'm gonna run again, and I'm gonna lead this Protect My Pet initiative. And the future is bright. There's a lot of great things that the Lord is lining up that imagine if we're able to do here on a bigger platform and impact more people. Don't lose hope in the political system. Swanson is coming. Come on up here. Come on up here. I'm not gonna walk back, because I want everybody to see our little mini hug. I do appreciate the church. You know, when COVID hit, everything shut down in a minute, and on March 16th, 2020, you know, I've been doing mission trips all over, and, you know, can you take your high heels off for a second? Cameras on, people. I'm Ohio, Detroit, Michigan. I'm so called her mom, even when I realized that I'm supposed to be rich. But, you know, a church family has always taught us, you know, as a family, so you can always rely on them. And, you know, sometimes they'll let you down, both family and church folks. And I deputized 45 pastors from all faiths on March 16, 2020, because I knew if we deployed the church, they'll serve the people. And that's what happened. So my heart is not just here because I'm a believer. It's here because I believe in the church family model. You know, not just the Lutherans, the Methodists, the Baptists, the Catholics. Listen, if you love the Lord and you want to serve people, I'm with you.
Okay.
All right, everybody. What?
What do you do with your badge?
Gosh, this is the version. Okay, thanks. All right, thanks, everybody. Bye.
Yeah.